introductions. I am just thrilled to be here surrounded by so many folks who are dedicated to transformative justice. This gathering is happening at such a critical moment in our nation's history. It's a time when it seems that many people all over the country, in small towns, big cities, from coast to coast, are beginning to wake up to the reality of race and justice in America. I think a time comes when the truth stares you in the face, daring you to look away and say nothing. But deep in your soul, you know that a breaking point has been reached, and that if you avert your gaze or change the subject, you will betray not only yourself, your children, or your community, but all those who risked their lives so that Black children would not have to be told that in the eyes of the law, their lives don't matter. That moment was reached when Michael Brown was gunned down and the young people of Ferguson stood up. It was not the brazen killing of a young unarmed Black man by the police that forced an end to the silence. To the contrary, what happened that day was nothing new. Isabel Wilkerson, the author of The Warmth of Other Suns, acknowledged this in an essay published in The Guardian, pointing out that the rate of police killings of Black Americans today is nearly the same as the rate of lynchings in the Jim Crow era. What happened that summer day when Officer Wilson killed Michael Brown was nothing new. But the young people in Ferguson had had enough. They were not going to allow the police to leave Michael Brown's body lying in the street for 4 hours while the authorities scrambled to get their story straight. These bold and courageous young folks took to the streets, and in the weeks and the months that followed that they stayed in the streets, they scrawled on handmade signs 3 words eerily reminiscent of eras we supposedly left behind: Black Lives Matter. Now, I'm well aware that this particular crisis may feel new to many in this country, but its roots are as old as the country itself. We continue to live the paradox of a nation founded with the bold preamble that all men are created equal with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while at the same time denying all of those basic civil and human rights to slaves, and writing into our original Constitution the rule that Black people counted as only 3/5 of a human being. This paradox of a nation born with lofty ideals of equality and freedom, but extending those ideals primarily to wealthy white men, is the founding paradox of this nation, and it remains a paradox to this day, even now as a Black president sits in the Oval Office. The glorious promise and the ugly paradox, and yet we too often close our eyes and refuse to acknowledge the painful implications. As I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight and getting my notes together, I kept getting messages from folks who were heading to Selma this weekend. Racial justice advocates, civil rights advocates from all over the country are heading to Selma, and I heard the President of the United States himself plans to make an appearance to commemorate the historic civil rights struggles and victories there. Now, at times like these, at these moments of commemoration, it's tempting to be romantic about the past struggles and overly rosy in our assessment of the present. But such revisionism does not serve the dream that Dr. King and Ella Baker and so many others risked their lives for. Now, none of this is to deny the extraordinary gains that have been made in some spheres. I mean, I would deny and dishonor the sacrifices of people like Ella Baker and many, many others if I didn't acknowledge that my own life has been drastically, greatly improved because of their courage, their sacrifice, their advocacy. But if we're going to ask ourselves honestly as we commemorate Selma, how far have we come and where must we go from here? What is truly necessary as we work for justice in this new time, this new age, then I think we must first pause and ask ourselves, how do we measure progress? We could measure it in all kinds of ways. The number of people who are CEOs or leading Fortune 500 companies, the number of black or brown politicians or presidents, or the number of people with 2-car garages and SUVs. We could measure our progress in purely materialistic terms. Do we have as much stuff as we think we should? Stuff like money, cars, degrees, titles. Measuring progress in this way seems to make sense in a capitalist society where the goal is to compete to get more stuff. There are winners and losers, and everyone says they want to get ahead. Very rarely do we ask, get ahead of whom? And what will happen to them? Those who are left behind. Well, I want to suggest that there is another way to measure progress, one that seems to have been forgotten in the years since Dr. King and Malcolm X were laid to rest. It's not a new measure by any means. To the contrary, it is very, very old. For centuries, it has been said by numerous philosophers and theologians that any society, any civilization, must be judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members and its prisoners.